All right, bad idea number 2. Always trust your feelings. In the happiness hypothesis, there was a whole chapter on changing your mind. This is the number one truth of pop psychology. This is the number one truth you find in every culture that leaves us any psychological wisdom literature. So the Stoics, the Buddhists, the Hindus were all fantastic on this. They all said roughly the same thing. It is not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of their significance. Buddha put it this way: your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own thoughts unguarded. But once you master your thoughts, then no one can help you as much, not even your father or your mother. You learn to interpret the world in ways that are helpful for you, and then you can face just about anything. This is also the core insight of cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the most powerful and easy to learn techniques in all of psychology. Aaron Beck discovered that if he could get depressed people to question their thinking patterns, they could be released from their depression temporarily. It would come back, but once they got practiced at it, they could actually keep it away forever. And so that's what CBT is all about. In CBT, you learn to recognize a bunch of common thought patterns, cognitive distortions, such as negative filtering. You only notice the bad stuff. Overgeneralizing, dichotomous thinking, breaking things into good and bad, black and white, right or wrong, everything's binary. And emotional reasoning. All of these distortions are encouraged on some campuses when we teach students, when we encourage emotional reasoning, when we teach them about microaggressions. Let me explain. So the microaggression concept is a very widespread concept. It gets 2 things right, I think, but it gets 2 things wrong, very wrong. So this is from an article. It goes back to, what's the name? Goes back to in the 1970s, but it was popularized by Derald Wing Su in a 2007 article in American Psychologist. And so it is useful to have a word for small acts of aggression, a microaggression. And these are in the context of racial insensitivity originally. And so it would be useful to have a word for somebody who tells a joke that seems insulting, but the guy says, it's just a joke, come on, it's just a joke. So plausible deniability. So it would be useful to have a term for small acts of aggression. And as we've made progress from big, overt, blatant acts of racism, which are much lower, as we've made such progress, maybe things are in a small, veiled, deniable way. So it would be great to have a term for that, microaggression. That would be great. But what about clumsy acts that make others uncomfortable, but there's no aggression whatsoever? In fact, maybe the person was even trying to be helpful. What should we call those? Well, we don't really have a word in the English language for that, but it would be great to have one, so great that we actually went and borrowed the French word, a faux pas, a false step, a clumsy act. It would be great, especially as we try to increase diversity and inclusion, it would be great to have fewer faux pas, to teach people, especially if you have a lot of international students and students from across social class. They can't know all the niceties of our language around diversity issues, so there's a lot of faux pas. So if we were to distinguish microaggressions from faux pas, that would be very helpful. That would be great to talk to freshmen about, to help them get along with each other and not give unneeded offense. Okay? That would be great. The problem is that the things we're talking about here, most of them are not clearly acts of aggression. So it's things like asking someone, where are you from? So if you look Asian or if you look in some way not clearly white or black, people will often ask you, where are you from? And then you say, as my wife says, I'm from State College. And then they say, no, I mean, like, where are you really from? Or or where were you born? Or where's your family from? Okay, now is that an act of aggression? It's often motivated by curiosity. People want to know, like, I've been to Korea. I was wondering if you're Korean or Chinese. So it's generally not motivated by any sort of hostility or aggression. But if you're asked this every day, yeah, that can be tiresome. So this is what the microaggression concept gets right, that we need a term for that. But when we call it aggression, what happens? What happens? What does it do to people? What does it do to members of historically marginalized groups when so many daily interactions are now labeled for them, interpreted for them as acts of aggression against you? So saying, you speak English very well, or if someone mispronounces your name repeatedly, or if someone says there's only one race, the human race, or if someone says America's a melting pot. Do we want students to interpret these as acts of aggression directed against them? Do we want them to see a world full of pins? That's what happens when we call it microaggression. If we called them faux pas, it would be great. But it gets worse, because the microaggression concept is presented always hand in hand with the idea that intentions don't matter. I don't care that you weren't badly intentioned. That doesn't matter. All that matters is what someone felt. In the end, what does the intent of our action really matter if our actions have the impact of furthering the marginalization or oppression of those around us? And so one of the most basic aspects of morality is we judge people by their intent. If someone bumps into me, it makes a world of difference if it was intentional or accidental. It's madness to ignore intent. But this is what we tell students: ignore intent. All that matters is how you feel, and you should be offended. So think about the challenge we face. Every school I go to, every institution, every business is trying to increase diversity. And so if you increase diversity, that guarantees more faux pas, more misunderstandings. It has to happen. There's no way around that. So as long as you're increasing diversity, you have more misunderstandings. There are two ways to handle it. One, let's talk about these issues. Diversity is hard. It has many benefits, but if we don't handle it right, it has many costs. So it's hard. Let's all try to be more polite, but let's also give each other the benefit of the doubt. This is hard stuff. There are misunderstandings. We're all flawed. We all have bad days. We have to be forgiving. We have to give each other the benefit of the doubt. That's one way to handle it. Imagine that that's the way it was done at Penn State. I don't know how it's done, but imagine that's the way it's done at Penn State. Conversely, imagine that instead of that, we teach students to focus only on the emotional impact, ignore the intent, only focus on how you feel, and we are training you to detect more and more acts of aggression against you so that you will feel more and more marginalized. And then also along the way, we're going to give you a reporting system. This is what we have at NYU. You have one here at Penn State too. If you feel offended by something, there's a number you can call. In every bathroom at NYU, there's a number telling students how to report. If I say something that they don't like, I can be reported. So I don't say things they don't like. I can be much more offensive here at Penn State because you can't report me. Okay. So that's the second bad idea. Well-intentioned, but if you make this the norm of your group, before you know it, you've increased tensions, hostilities, and feelings of marginalization.